42 cases of self-immolation so far in Tibet, of which 35 have died, which really reflects how grave the situation in Tibet is, because Tibetans are willing to sacrifice their lives for the cause of Tibet. And it also reflects that there is no room for any form of protest, because last February there were a couple of protests and they were shot at and 8 Tibetans were killed. Hence, because there is no room for any form of protest, Tibetans are resorting to almost like the last resort of protest. So that reflects how repressive the system is, how tragic the situation in Tibet is.
When you say freedom for Tibet, what is the way forward from your point of view? What is the compromise that the people of Tibet would be able to accept?
Tibetan administration advocates middle policy, which seeks genuine autonomy within China and within the framework of the Chinese constitution, so thereby not threatening their sovereignty or territorial integrity. And what we ask for is within the Chinese laws. If they implement their own laws, it could amount to autonomy. So we've been as reasonable, as realistic as possible, but the hardline leaders in China has refused to enter into dialogue for a positive outcome. Our envoys have met their Chinese counterpart 9 times from 2002 to 2010, but there hasn't been any breakthrough so far, unfortunately.
Of course, you're here in Australia for a number of meetings. You're not meeting the Australian government. We've seen this in the past when the Dalai Lama has visited, that there's great sensitivity around this issue. How do you interpret the fact that the Australian government is not meeting you, in a sense being oversensitive towards Beijing?
Because His Holiness Dalai Lama has met President Barack Obama, David Cameron of England, Stephen Harper of Canada, and Chancellor and Foreign Minister of Australia just recently. And all of them have their relationship with China going on as before. So by not meeting His Holiness Dalai Lama or me, it's not going to give them what they call in business Tibet concession or so. Rather, it's really unfortunate, because it will look better and fair if they meet both sides and hear both sides and make a judgment. Obviously, the Australian leaders do meet with Chinese leaders and hear their perspective, which is they ought to do. But if they hear from Tibetan side, then it will look fair, because what they say and whatever they do, it will reflect Australia and Australian values. So in that sense, it's only fair. It could have been better had I get an opportunity to meet with Australian leaders and share our perspective.
If you were to meet, what would you ask them to do on your behalf?
For example, our Foreign Minister, Honourable Bob Carr, himself has stated that he would like to see Australian ambassador and diplomats go to Tibet to assess what is going on, and if possible, Australian parliamentarians to go to Tibet to assess. And that is a fair request, and that is a fair idea, but the Chinese government has refused the request. So that reflects that there's something that the Chinese government doesn't want Australians and the world at large to see. So I would make that request. And Tibetans are as human beings as Australians, and self-immolators have died, and a statement of concern from time to time sends a message of hope to Tibetans inside Tibet. And because this is also the basic principle of Australian people. What Tibet is seeking is freedom, human rights and democracy, which are enshrined in the Constitution of Australia, and many Australians died for. So what we are seeking is what any human being ought to have.
You speak of the intransigence of the Chinese government. China, of course, is becoming a major player on the world stage now, a world citizen, if you like. What do you think needs to happen before there's going to be a real dialogue between the two sides?
This talk about China, how they're going to behave, what kind of China going to be, I would make an argument that it depends partly on how world respond towards China. If the world led China and the hardline Chinese leaders do the way they want, they will keep doing it. But if the world stands up for basic values and freedom, then China will also modify and bend towards freedom as well. So what we need is space for freedom, and also to convey to the Chinese leaders that it is a win-win proposition. Tibetans are not asking anything drastic, anything unreasonable. They are essentially saying if the Chinese government implement their own laws, that could amount to autonomy. So this is a reasonable thing and win-win proposition. This will really improve the image of China. They say they are rising peacefully, but they ought to demonstrate peace in Tibet first.